So the plan was to cut the two sides of this log, drill a big hole in the middle, and glue that two sides back. When I finished cutting the two sides, I started with this drill bit and realized pretty quickly that it wouldn't work. And this little pointy thing was too short and the tool couldn't stop moving around, creating that big gap and made it impossible to drill. At this point, the only other solution I found was to use a hole saw and remove the excess with a flat drill. And by the way, this log is not gonna set on fire. It was like 4 degrees in the shop, and just the simple friction was make this log pretty steamy. So no log that did burn during this operation. The process was pretty sketchy, but it worked, so good enough. After repeating this operation a few times, I finally reached the other side and just had to flip it over and finishing drilling that hole. I 3D printed this little cylinder and glued some sandpaper on it so I could sand inside sharp edges. It was time to glue back these two sides with some wood glue and sawdust, clamp it down and let dry overnight. Next morning, it was time to remove the bark, and I guess this is when I realized that maybe I had to drop out this project just by seeing how wormy it was. But I kept on with the draw knife, hoping that the wood wasn't badly damaged. I used the rasp to rough shaping as best as I could until I had a pretty decent cylinder shape. Even if this wood was pretty easy to shape, trust me, this process took me a few hours and my hands were happy to rest a little after that. Then I quickly sanded just to make the cracks and holes more visible and make it easier to apply some wood filler. When everything was dry, I sanded the log and then drilled the entrance on the front. I reused this 3D printed tool to smooth down the edges, and I guess that's it. Of course, there was still a bunch of holes in this log, but once it was sanded, it didn't look like the disaster I was expecting. For the roof structure, I used some exterior plywood and these little pieces that I cut it off camera with some wood glue and a few drops of sea glue to maintain that in place until I had these little screws on the top. For the ties, I had the idea of cutting some thick branches and slicing them with the bandsaw. Then I glued some sandpaper on the support so I could sand off all my ties more easily. And by the way, if you haven't been to the manicure lately, this is a good solution to get your nails done fast. Anyway, after all that sanding and my manicure done, I glued them down, starting from the bottom to the top part. I shaped this branch to fit on the roof's top part and glue it in place. Then I glued this rod on the side so I can hang some seeds. And finally, I applied 3 coats of exterior varnish, and voila! Now we just have to wait for the birds to come.